A millionaire kills poor people without facing any consequences, and the police don't suspect a thing.
Hey, Paul! Ah!
In 1989 New York, Patrick Bateman is a 27-year-old successful investment banker. His life revolves around high-end restaurants and maintaining a polished, respectable image. He has wealthy friends, a devoted fiancée, and plenty of money. But deep down, he despises it all. Morning workouts, picking out clothes, exercising, expensive accessories, and luxury furniture, everything that makes him appear like an ordinary person, mean nothing to him. But that's just the surface. Behind the mask of a successful man lies a true psychopath, struggling with a lack of identity. Consumed by inner torment, he fantasizes about causing pain. At a restaurant, he imagines strangling the waiter. In a nightclub, he envisions bathing in the blood of the bartender who refuses his card payment. The only person Patrick shows any kindness to is his secretary, Jean, whom he advises to dress more provocatively. That evening, he meets up with his fiancée and their social circle, who gossip about him just like the rest of high society. Every smile hides a secret, including those of his fiancée, Evelyn, who is secretly involved with one of Patrick's friends. But this doesn't bother him. After all, he has a mistress too, Courtney, Evelyn's best friend. One night on his way home, Patrick strikes up a conversation with a lonely woman, only to kill her shortly after. The next morning, he takes his bloody clothes to a laundromat, getting into an argument with the staff about cleaning them. Wanting to impress Courtney, Patrick tries to book a table at the elite Dorsia restaurant, but it's impossible. The manager scoffs at him, knowing only the highest tier of society can get in. To save face, Patrick decides to get Courtney drunk, so she won't realize he's taking her to a far less exclusive restaurant instead. The next morning, at a business meeting, Luis compliments Patrick's suit. Patrick enjoys the flattery but recoils when Luis tries to touch him. He despises physical contact. But what enrages him more is Paul Allen, a wealthier and more successful colleague. Paul has direct connections with the company's owner, handles major financial deals, and effortlessly books tables at Dorsia. When Paul meets Patrick, he mistakes him for Marcus Halberstrom, another investment banker. Marcus has a similar wardrobe, the same glasses, even the same hairstylist. Patrick isn't surprised. On Wall Street, businessmen are nearly indistinguishable from each other. During a meeting, Patrick tries to show off his new business card, specially designed with a unique color and flawless font. But instead of impressing his colleagues, he realizes they have put just as much effort into their own cards. Seeing others outshine him, Patrick begins to sweat, seething with rage while trying to keep his composure. That evening, while walking home, he wanders into a dark alley where a homeless man and his dog are the only ones around. Patrick feigns sympathy, pretending to be understanding, until his kindness turns into uncontrollable fury. Pulling a knife from his briefcase, he brutally kills both the homeless man and his dog, the latter's barking drawing unwanted attention. The next morning, he resumes his usual routine, caring for his body with the same precision as always. Outwardly, he appears human, flesh, hair, teeth, and blood, but inside, he feels nothing. His only motivations are greed and disgust. His bloodlust is growing, and he knows it's no longer a passing urge, it's permanent. Patrick realizes he is on the verge of complete madness, and soon the mask of normalcy will fall away, revealing the ruthless American psychopath beneath. That night, Patrick attends a Christmas party with Evelyn. He ignores her demands and finds a way to approach Paul, reminding him of their dinner plans. Soon after, they leave for a quiet cafe. Paul, still believing Patrick is Marcus, drunkenly insults him, calling him a complete failure, unworthy of his prestigious job or a woman like Evelyn. Playing along, Patrick gets Paul even more intoxicated, then lures him back to his apartment. While playing Hip to Be Square by his favorite band, Huey Lewis and the News, Patrick carefully prepares for his next kill. Out of Paul's sight, he slips on a raincoat to protect his expensive suit from blood splatters and grabs a freshly polished axe. Seizing the perfect moment, Patrick violently attacks Paul and finishes him off. Feeling calmer, Patrick decides to dispose of the body and drags it into a taxi. On the street, he's spotted by Luis, but Luis doesn't question the large, expensive suitcase Patrick is carrying. After getting rid of the body, Patrick heads to Paul's apartment to cover his tracks. He leaves a fake voicemail on Paul's answering machine, claiming Paul left for a business trip to London. Gathering Paul's belongings and toiletries, Patrick takes the suitcase to make his fabricated story more convincing. A few days later, Patrick's secretary, Jean, informs him that Detective Donald Kimball has arrived to investigate Paul's disappearance. Nervous about being exposed, Patrick asks Jean to say he's unavailable, but it's too late. Donald is already at the door. Trying to collect himself, Patrick pretends to be on a call before inviting the detective in. During their conversation, Patrick gives vague answers and struggles to come up with a solid alibi for the night Paul vanished. He abruptly ends the meeting, claiming he has a sudden business appointment. At home, Patrick tries to calm his nerves by working out and watching horror movies. Later that evening, he hires a prostitute, promising her a generous payment for her time. Pretending to be Paul, he easily gains Christie's trust and invites her over. On the way, he calls another escort to join them. Patrick acts like a perfect gentleman, charming the women and making them feel safe. Christie and Sabrina follow his every command, stripping down and indulging his whims. While they focus on the money, Patrick is more interested in admiring himself in the mirror. As the night goes on, Patrick refuses to let them leave, claiming the fun has just begun. Using a variety of tools, he inflicts physical harm on both women. By morning, they leave his apartment bruised and bleeding, but significantly richer. During the day, Patrick meets his friends at a restaurant where the conversation turns to women and relationships. He openly admits to having two sides, one that wants to be romantic and another that fantasizes about killing. His friends are shocked by this confession, but the conversation is soon interrupted by Luis, who proudly shows off his new business card. The elegant design and gold lettering fuel Patrick's jealousy. He can't stand the thought of someone as pathetic as Luis outshining him. Consumed by rage, Patrick follows Luis into the restroom and, wearing gloves, attempts to strangle him. To Patrick's shock, Luis interprets the attack as a romantic gesture. Believing Patrick shares his feelings, Luis starts kissing his hands and suggests going somewhere private. Disgusted and panicked, Patrick abandons his murder attempt and rushes out of the restroom, forgetting to remove his gloves. Not long after, Detective Kimball contacts Patrick again to follow up on Paul's disappearance. During their conversation, Patrick stumbles over his alibi and gives an inconsistent account of that night. The detective hints that he has evidence contradicting Patrick's story, making Patrick even more anxious. Before leaving, Donald advises Patrick to carefully recall the events of that night, implying that the truth will eventually catch up with him. To distract himself, Patrick spends time with Courtney, his mistress. Knowing she's about to get married, he decides to end their affair. Heartbroken, Courtney confesses that she hoped he would care enough to fight for their relationship, but Patrick remains cold and detached, his self-interest far outweighing her feelings. Realizing there's no future with him, Courtney says goodbye for good. That evening, Patrick meets up with a friend to hit a nightclub. They indulge in alcohol and cocaine before meeting a few girls. Being successful, handsome, and wealthy, Patrick effortlessly charms a young model student and invites her back to his place, intending to kill her. The next morning, unfazed by the previous night's murder, Patrick plays with a lock of the blonde's hair in his office. He invites his secretary, Jean, to dinner, giving her the freedom to choose any restaurant. When she suggests Dorsia, it triggers an intense wave of anger in Patrick. He calls to make a reservation, but as always, he is denied. Pretending he secured a table, Patrick suggests they meet at his apartment for drinks before heading to the restaurant. Excited by the invitation and eager to impress him, Jean happily agrees. That evening, Jean arrives at Patrick's apartment. Unaware that the severed head of the woman he killed the night before is stored in his refrigerator. Their conversation shifts to life and work, with Jean sharing her feelings of success and admiration for Patrick. Openness and interest fail to impress him. As the evening progresses, Patrick silently stands behind her, aiming a nail gun at the back of her head. At that moment, a voicemail from Evelyn interrupts them, making Jean realize Patrick is still in a relationship. Feeling uneasy, she offers to leave to avoid making things awkward. Patrick, struggling to control his impulses, agrees and warns her that if she stays, he might hurt her. The next day, Patrick meets with Detective Donald Kimball again, who continues investigating Paul's disappearance. Over lunch, the detective reassures Patrick that he doesn't consider him a suspect. In fact, he provides Patrick with an alibi, insisting that witnesses confirmed he was with friends the entire evening. Paul vanished. Additionally, someone claims to have seen Paul in London, further casting doubt on the investigation. Though previous statements confused someone else for Paul, this new information makes it almost official, leading the detective to believe Paul simply took an unplanned vacation due to burnout. Patrick is relieved, but also unsettled, beginning to question his own reality and what actually happened. That evening, Patrick returns to the spot where he first met Christy and invites her to spend the night with him again. Traumatized by their last encounter, which left her in the emergency room with severe injuries that might need surgery, Christy hesitates. To win her over, Patrick writes her a generous check as compensation and promises to treat her better this time. Tempted by the substantial offer, Christy decides to take the risk and agrees. They head to Paul's apartment, where Patrick's acquaintance, Elizabeth, soon joins them. Adding cocaine to their champagne, Patrick charms the women and suggests they engage in an intimate act for his entertainment. At first, they laugh off his request, finding it ridiculous, but under the influence of the drugs, they eventually give in. Later that night, during their encounter, Patrick loses control. He violently bites Elizabeth, drawing blood, and eventually kills her. Realizing the danger she is in, Christy tries to escape, determined not to become his next victim. The apartment is so massive that she struggles to find an exit. As she opens door after door, she discovers the bodies of Patrick's previous victims and realizes he is a cold-blooded killer with no remorse. Patrick catches up to her and bites her leg, but Christy fights back and breaks free. Desperate, she pounds on her neighbors' doors for help, but no one responds. She races down the stairwell, with Patrick chasing after her wielding a chainsaw. As she reaches the first floor, Patrick, unable to catch her, drops the chainsaw from above. It lands on her, killing her instantly. The next day, Patrick sketches everything that happened, realizing it's becoming harder for him to control his emotions. Later, at a restaurant, he meets with Evelyn and abruptly ends their engagement, admitting that he never loved her. Devastated, Evelyn causes a scene, drawing the attention of other diners, which only fuels Patrick's anger. Refusing to continue the conversation, he coldly leaves the restaurant. That evening, Patrick stops at an ATM to withdraw cash. While there, he notices a stray cat and picks it up, briefly showing affection. Suddenly, a chilling message flashes across the ATM screen. "Feed me a stray cat." Overwhelmed by his unraveling sanity, Patrick tries to force the cat into the machine. In a moment of madness, he pulls out a gun and shoots the animal. An elderly woman witnesses the act and tries to stop him, but he kills her without hesitation. As Patrick stands over her body, a police patrol spots him, triggering a chase. Desperate to escape, he sets off car alarms to distract the officers. But as he runs into an alley, 2 police cars block his path. The officers open fire, but Patrick responds with deadly accuracy, killing them and blowing up their vehicle. With a brief window to escape, he flees the scene. Seeking refuge, Patrick rushes into an office building, only to realize he's in the wrong one. Mistaken for an employee named Mr. Smith, he panics and kills the security guard before frantically searching for a way out. In his confusion, he murders a janitor as well. Finally reaching his own office building, Patrick greets the familiar security guard and locks himself in his office, aware that the police are still searching for him. Seeing a helicopter hovering outside, he realizes his situation is spiraling out of control. In a desperate attempt to confess, Patrick calls his lawyer and leaves a frantic voicemail. Through tears, he admits to murdering homeless people, prostitutes, his ex-girlfriend, and Paul. He estimates his victim count to be between 20 and 40 and begs for legal help. Patrick acknowledges that he is mentally unstable and needs treatment rather than prison. The next morning, Patrick visits Paul's apartment to clean up any remaining evidence. To his shock, the apartment is completely empty and listed for sale. In one room, he overhears a group discussing a property deal. Searching the closet and other rooms, Patrick finds no trace of blood or bodies. When questioned, he pretends to be a potential buyer who saw the listing in the newspaper. However, the realtor sees through his facade and sternly asks him to leave, implying that she knows more than she lets on. Intimidated, Patrick apologizes and quickly exits the apartment. Feeling broken and confused, Patrick calls his office and tearfully tells his secretary, Jean, that he won't be coming to work. Concerned by his emotional state, Jean searches his desk and discovers a journal filled with graphic sketches of the murders and violent acts he claims to have committed. Later, Patrick meets his colleagues at a restaurant and spots his lawyer. Desperate for acknowledgement, he confronts Harold about the voicemail he left. However, the lawyer mistakes Patrick for another colleague and laughs it off, believing it was just a dark, childish prank. Annoyed by the constant jokes about pathetic Patrick, Harold dismisses the confession entirely, stating that it can't be true because he recently had dinner with Paul in London. Frustrated and confused, Patrick insists that everything he said is real, describing his crimes in detail, but Harold remains unconvinced and leaves, telling Patrick to stop bothering him. As Patrick returns to his table, his colleagues watch a televised speech by Ronald Reagan, debating whether the president is a harmless old man or a hidden psychopath. Overwhelmed by psychological distress, Patrick is trapped in a state of uncertainty. He cannot distinguish whether his horrific acts were real or figments of his twisted imagination. Despite his confessions, Patrick realizes that he will never face consequences for his crimes. His guilt, fear, and anxiety consume him, but the world around him remains oblivious. In a haunting realization, Patrick understands that his confession means nothing, and he is doomed to continue living in his fractured reality. The ending leaves us questioning reality. Did Patrick really commit those brutal murders, or were they just dark fantasies from his unstable mind? What do you think? Share your thoughts below. Subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on notifications and leave a like to support the channel. Thank you for watching.